Hey everyone, and welcome back. You may see that I'm in a different position than you if you're following along exactly, and that's because I started talking about literally every unit. I got near the end, and then I realized my mic was muted. This has been a problem recently with my recordings, but we're just going to go through everything I just said to myself again, so I just reaffirmed my opinions. At least there's that. So we don't actually have to talk to any of the students, we just need to talk to the captains of each house. So we're going to talk to... We're going to talk briefly about the units that I plan on using, and then we're going to talk about every unit in the Golden House and what exactly my plans are for builds for them. Like I said earlier, if you're going for an actual turn-clearing builds, then just pick units that can become potentially really good Wyvern Lords or Falcon Knights or mounted units of some kind. So if your unit isn't mounted, essentially, and if your healer doesn't have Warp or Recover or proper Psychic or Silence or something like that, then don't bother with them because you're not going to be able to get high turn counts with them. But we're not going to be playing for high turn counts. All we're playing for is for fun, and we're going to be playing for, for the guide mostly, so you guys can unlock all of your students before getting to the second half of the game. When it comes to the Black Eagles, I only use maybe 2 to 3 units from here. Ferdinand, Lionheart, and Casper are all, unfortunately, units I'm not a big fan of. All the boys, I see. I like all the girls. But Ferdinand is kind of mediocre, in my opinion. He is... I don't like his stat spread that well. It isn't as focused in like tankiness and attack like Sylvain, and it isn't focused in speed and skill like Leone, so I'm not a big fan of Ferdinand. Lionheart has some really great... what am I thinking of? Support skills, so like he's got like, I think he's got Warp, and I think he's got does he have like Sleep or something like that? No, he's a sleepy character, that's what I'm thinking of. He's got some good utility skills. That's what he has. He has good utility skills, but he isn't really that adept at super healing people up, unlike Mercedes. And he isn't great at attacking, unlike Marianne, so he can be a weird one. But if you're just looking for like a utility healer, then go for Lionheart. Casper is not a good unit. He's got some bad growths. He's supposed to be a like fighter tank, like a high HP attack, high strength fighter, but he doesn't really fill that role as well as like Raphael and Hilda both do it. So we're not going to be using him. Bernadetta is the questionable character in this group, where I like her because she has a hit and run sort of play style in the late game, and it's fun to use, but it's not super amazing. So we might pick her up. I just like her personality, and I think most people just really like her personality and her backstory, so that might be the reason why she ends up on our team, just because she is a character that I just like to like. So there's that. So let's talk about Dorothea. So Dorothea is a good magic caster. She has a really good spell list, and her growths are okay to pretty good. I would say she's like pretty good when it comes to like growths and like spell list combined. She's a pretty good magic caster, but I really like her as a dancer, and that might just seem like the basic bitch thing to do because a lot of people just like putting her as a songstress because, well, that's her whole background. She's a songstress. But let me explain to you why I like her. Her ability songstress, which is if you're next to adjacent allies, they're going to gain 10% health during the start of the turn. That's good. That's really good. And since she's a dancer, she's going to be like not in the front lines, but next to the front lines. So you have a way of healing up your people without relying completely on healers. On top of that, she has Meteorite and Thoron, which gives her bonus range on magic attacks. And if you have Meteorite equipped while you're dancing, it will still count for chain attacks. So essentially, your units that are far ahead of her will just get bonus attack for her being in range of Meteorite. So it's fantastic because while she's squishy, and some people think dancers need a bit more health, which I can definitely see the logic there. While she may be a bit squishy, she wants to stay behind the front line to begin with. So why not give her bonus utility when she's behind the front line, and then give her opportunities to dance, but not have to dance every turn. And since she'll just have Thoron and Meteorite equipped, she'll be dealing bonus damage in the form of like a support chain link. I think she does very well there, and personally she's done very well there for myself. But I would understand if you put someone like Ferdinand or Ignatz, or Casper, characters that aren't as useful of picks, and you throw them in there just so that they get so you get use out of them since they're a bit tankier. I understand that, but I personally like her to be my team's dancer, so she's gonna probably fill that role this playthrough. Petra's defining ability is really good. It's bonus crit whenever you're fighting people who are at 50% or equal to 50%, or are greater than, I think it's if their HP is greater than 50%, is less than 50%, or equal to 50%, which means since she has really high speed growth and she has a pretty good strength growth, she's normally going to knock someone to 50% in one hit, which means she's just going to have bonus crit on her second attack, because she's pretty much going to be guaranteed to have a second attack. So you throw a Brave Sword on her, and you can potentially have 2 to 3 attacks where she's going to be having a plus 20% chance on her crit, which is fantastic. She's probably she's the best, if not second best at Swordmaster position, with Felix being the best just because he has better growths in my opinion, and his defining ability just means he's going to have a bonus 5 attack throughout the whole game, which is really solid. But yeah, Petra is a very good unit, and we'll probably be picking her up. We're going to pick her up regardless with this guide, but she might be a mainstay on the team. We'll see. And that's the Black Eagles for you. We'll get to the Golden Deer last because I have a lot to talk about with them. So let's go to the Blue Lions. The Blue Lions are a bit of a strange one because they have, in my opinion, besides Ashe, none of these other units are duds at all. Well, we can't use Dedune, we can't use Dimitri, but Felix is a great unit and works very well as a high damaging support. So like if you have an adjudicant, if he's an adjudicant for someone and he has a chance to attack because that's what his adjudicant skill is going to be, he can deal some high damage, which is nice. Ashe, I think, is just mediocre all around. He's part of the Archer line, and I'm not a huge fan of the Archer like growths, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend you make him a top priority when it comes to picking him up. You can kind of pick him up last. I'm not a big fan of him, but of course, if you like him and you're a fan of him, then he has the cooking. He has the cooking time event, so you can build up support with him really fast. That at least is a plus. Sylvain is a fantastic unit. He's a really good Cavalier. He's more focused on HP, strength, and defense growths compared to Ferdinand and Leone. Actually, I think Ferdinand has I believe, I think he has like better luck or something like that. Ferdinand beats him out in some growths, but Sylvain, if you're at least playing female Byleth, is a super easy pickup, and he will fill in that role of a frontline Cavalier perfectly well. Mercedes is the end-all be-all healer. If you just want someone on your team to provide high heals and lots of heals, then pick Mercedes. We'll probably be picking her up because there's some difficult paralogs that you have to do without her. And I really like her, so we'll probably pick her up early. Annette is the definition of a B- mage. I think she has solid growths, and her spell list leaves a little to be desired, but is fine in the whole grand scheme of things, especially since magic deals so much damage in this game. There are better options like Lysithea and arguably Marianne, and Dorothea I think is even a better option. So like there's options above her, but she's still very much solid. We probably just won't be using her this playthrough after we pick her up. And then Ingrid. Alright, so I don't know what to think of Ingrid. I've seen plenty of other people's playthroughs where she worked out perfectly for them, but I think I've just been RNG'd screwed on her too many times, because technically when you look at it, she has the highest growths in the game, like overall growths. So she should be a stat monster, but she has like a lot of 40s and 30%, and like high 30. She has like, I think she has a couple 35% and a lot of like 40% gross, which are, which are solid, but not fantastic. So I've been burned on her a couple times when I've tried to use her. But I know she can be like a god unit. It's just I haven't personally had the experience of it yet. So I probably won't be using her in this playthrough, and in fact, I don't think I will. She might be a support for someone else. She might be a support for someone with flying, but that's about it. So that's the Blue Lions for you. We're probably going to actually use Mercedes and Sylvain. But and Felix is going to be used either as an adjudicant or as an actual unit, but we'll get there when we get there. Lastly, we have the Golden Deers, which are the actual students that we're going to be playing with the whole game, so let's talk about them. Claude is simply put, he's a lord, which means he's good. He's going to be good at every stage in the game. And, you know, his bonus is that he gets, like, I think he gets 1.25 extra experience. Oh, 1.2. Which is basically he's just going to get an extra 20% experience from every single fight he's in. So you don't have to feed him as much. You don't have to feed him kills. He can get levels just off of fighting people. So that's fantastic. It's a lot like Byleth, because Byleth and Claude are going to set up for a lot of kills, especially in the early game. Lorenz is a weird one. But I think I've finally decided what I really like him doing. So Distinguished House just gives him bonus damage. Which is good because he has hybrid growths, which means he isn't going to excel in either physical or magic for the most part. In fact, in the early and mid game, I think he's very not great until you can get him to his second stage. And if you're going to go as a physical unit, I think he makes for a very subpar like Cavalier and Soldier. So I never bring him down that route. What I do bring him down, though, is the mage route. Magic damage in general is just better than physical damage in this game. There's a lot more units with magic with resistance weaknesses, so you can abuse magic a lot in this game, and since he has the option to go into it, I think he's fine. And since he is, compared to the other magic users we're going to have, Marianne and Lysithea, he's a lot tankier, which means we can potentially set him up trades to give other people kills, though in my honest opinion he's going to need the setups himself for the early game. He is, in the late game, a monster, but it's just getting to that late game because he becomes like the best hybrid tank in the game. He becomes one of the better hybrid tanks in the game when he becomes a Dark Knight. So he's going to be dishing out a good amount of damage, usually not enough to one-shot people, but he will definitely be able to survive an attack or two, which is really important for the late game. And he can take on any attack, which is important. So he can take on some physical damage, and he can take on magical damage, which is really nice. Very well-rounded character in the late game, but needs a lot of help in the early to mid. So we're going to take him down the mage route, and he will, that way his damage will be more substantial. Yeah, but that's Lorenz for you. Raphael. Now, Raphael is probably the problem. Because when you look at the Blue Lions, they have Dedue. When you look at the Black Eagles, they have Caspar, and while Caspar isn't great, he has a high enough speed to not get completely destroyed by magic. Unfortunately, Raphael has horrible speed stats and horrible resistance stats. So if you take him down the defensive route, there's just no way in hell he's ever going to get any resistance. So you have to feed him your resistance items. He makes for a great and fantastic freaking warrior into War Master. But he, unfortunately, that means because he wants to go into the more tankier by HP route, it means you don't have anyone to be your real physical tank for the early and mid game. Unless you try to assign that to Hilda, but Hilda doesn't do that well either. Hilda wants to go down the same path as Raphael, but rather instead end up as a Wyvern Master, or as a Wyvern Lord. So it's really unfortunate, because the Golden Deer don't have any super efficient physical tanks, unlike the Blue Lions. Do. So it's just really unfortunate, man. But for this, we're probably just gonna keep them down what I usually do, which is if you put him through Grappler. If you put him through Brawler and then Grappler, he'll get some bonus speed, which is what he really wants, even though his resistance will be like friggin' nil. But yeah, he becomes a monster in mid-game, but early game he needs a lot of attention. Ooh, I hope you guys can hear that train nice and well, but let's hop on to Ignatz. Ignatz is a character that I have consistently ranked down near the bottom of my list. He's going to stay near the bottom of my list, though I have found my own personal way of making him a little bit more enjoyable for myself. Like I've said before, I think Archer lines are the freaking worst. I absolutely dislike Archer lines. I just don't like the whole only focusing. They have mediocre strength stats while having fantastic speed and dex stats. So while they're going to hit, they're just not going to hit for a lot. So what I've recently done is, since he has a strength and sword and bow and authority, which are all things I like, I usually bring him down the mercenary route, which will sound a little bit odd. It might sound odd for some people, but I keep him in mercenary for like the 10 level. So he's gonna be a Myrmidon because he enjoys the speed stats and he's gonna enjoy the extra speed growth. But then I put him into mercenary for just like those 10 levels for just like a 5% increase at strength, because I just want more strength on the kid. And then you can potentially bring him down hero, though I would argue he just does better as an assassin. And usually by putting him through that mercenary route, he has a little bit more strength to be more of a force on the field. If you're playing through New Game Plus, I would recommend you give him the Sigil of the Beast, because that will also just give him more damage. He's just going to kind of always be a bit of a mediocre character, and if you want, you can definitely bring him down that hero route, so have him train in swords and axes, so that way he's just going to have a bit more tankiness, more strength, and you don't really have to worry too much about his dex stat, because Watchful Eye is just pretty much bonus dex. I don't know why they just didn't give him more dex. But yeah, that's Ignatz for you. And arguably Watchful Eye is just better than a standard dex stat, since it's going to be affected by everything. He's always going to have plus 20 attack, no matter plus 20 hit, no matter what situation he's in. So yeah, that's Ignatz for you. He's going to get used, but he might get dropped in the late game. I don't know yet. We'll see. Lysithea, I don't have to say much about her. Her strengths are all you need to know. And look at that magic stat, and look at her relatively good speed stat. That's literally what her strengths are what you want to do. Just put her in reason and in faith. You can try to go for that blooming talent in sword, but I'm not a huge fan of it. So I like to just give her, just pop her, just give her reason and give her faith. Keep her in the what is it? Warlock. It's either like Warlock or Sage, I think it's called. But keep her in there for as long as possible before you swap her to Gremory, because Gremory doesn't have amazing stat growth. It's actually pretty poor, the stat growth in Gremory, but you can definitely end her in Gremory. I would just recommend you keep her, while her stats are still growing, you keep her in the Warlock and Sage path. That way she has just better magic growth and speed growth. Well, I don't actually think your speed growth gets affected regardless, but who cares? Lysithea is going to always pretty much be a fantastic unit, no matter what team you put her on. Mary Ann. So, Mary Ann is a bit she has a couple weird things to her. Her defense growth is one of the worst in the game, if not the worst. So she is going to be the main target of all your defense growth items. And while she has a strength in sword, she really is going to be training in Lance. So we're going to give her a Lance early on, because we can train her Lance skill up on archers and some magic damaging enemies in the early game, since she has such a high resistance stat. She's going to be our primarily healer on this team. She has some good damage abilities like Aura, and she does a really good job at resistance taking with Nosferatu. She has mediocre growths other than her magic and resistance stat, so she might not end up being the completely best unit for you, but she'll make for a solid healer. We're going to bring her down the Holy Knight path just so she can have bonus mobility, which is always nice. She'll have bonus mobility, a little more bonus bulk to her, And by the end game, she'll probably already have a pretty much good enough magic stat to carry her through the rest of the game. So that is Marianne for you. Also, her ability, Animal Friend, is freaking great because you can pretty much trigger that all the time, especially in mid-game. 20% bonus health is 20% max health recovery is nothing to sneeze at. So there you go. Hilda. If you look up... So in the past, I have done what a lot of people argue is not great for Hilda. And that is, hold up, sorry about that. And that is, I usually take her down the Armored Knight thing, because you know what? She has a budding talent in armor, though I think it's just -6 speed after combat, which is actually fairly decent. But her other growth take a hit, specifically her speed, which is a strength to her, because she can go down the warrior into Wyvern Lord and double with a really good strength stat, and she'll have pretty decent bulk by going down those paths. So I think we're going to take her down the standard Brigand fighter into Brigand into warrior, and then finishing off with a Wyvern Lord. But I don't know, because I'm kind of just game planning for Maddening. I think once I play Maddening difficulty, Raphael's going to be a strictly early game unit who then just gets dropped in the mid game because his stats are going to be too subpar due to the Armor Knight's like poor relative growths. But yeah, for this playthrough, we're going to take her down what most people take her down. And Leonie is lastly, in my opinion, she is the best Cavalier in the game. She's my favorite Cavalier in the game, and she makes for a fan-freaking-tastic Paladin. But I am going to try something a little bit different this playthrough. I think I might... You know, I'm double thinking about it, and I was gonna say I might put her down the thief path, and we can get some steals off on the dark seals, and you know she's gonna make for a good sword master. But the more I doubled down on it, I think the Golden Deer have a problem with having a lot of subpar frontliners. So why don't I make her just a good frontliner? Like keep her down that paladin path, so that way she can take a couple hits, get healed up, and get back in it, since she'll have good mobility. And since, you know what, I think that's what it's supposed to be. Since the Golden Knights don't have any fantastic frontliner, if you have a couple okay frontliners, it probably just makes up for that. So we'll do that. But yeah, that is the plan for this playthrough. I hope you guys stick around long enough for it. Oh yeah, by the way, why don't we just talk to all the Golden Deer at least.
You must be the renowned mercenary who rescued Claude. Honestly, you should not have troubled yourself over the likes of him. My name...
That's Lorenz. He's kind of a dick. You'll find that Leonie... You know what, we'll just talk to all of them.
The dining hall's that way, if that's what you're looking for.
No, Raphael. That's Captain Gerald's kid. Hi, I'm Leonie Pinelli, Captain Gerald's first and greatest apprentice. I'm sure he's told you about me.
Nice to meet you. I'm Raphael Kirsten. Who are you again?
So there's no decisions to be made here, but it's just an introduction, and you can talk to every single student from every single class. You don't have to, and there's no decisions to be made for support ups, but that's just so you know.
So you're the skilled mercenary who saved Claude, are you?
Oh, you are? It's such an honor to meet you. Ignatz Victor. My parents are Alliance merchants.
And I am Lysithea von Ordelia. Please do not forget it. Hey, are you that mercenary? Everyone's been talking about you. I'm Hilda Valentine Goneril, and her name is... Marianne von Edmund. Are you joining the Knights of Seros or something? Well, I look forward to seeing more of you.
Alright, so since we met all the Golden Deer, I think I will call this episode good. Next episode, we're going to do an explore through the monastery, and we're going to talk to students and stuff. So there's actually going to be some dialogue choices that we need to pick correctly, and then after that, we'll have our first battle. So, with that, I want to thank you guys for sticking around this whole episode. If you guys have any ideas on what we might possibly want to curve this team into looking like, then let me know down in the comments. And I want to thank you guys for watching all the way through. I think I already said that, but bye-bye.